this out of the way. Hey, Sean here from SpeedCubeReview.com. I hear people talk about quite often a handicap system for cubing where you can more easily compare and compete with other cubers that are much faster than you. And although this is a fun idea and used a lot in practically every other sport and activity, it's not something I think is a good idea in competition because that's just, we're used to competing with ourselves. But it could be a nice, fun idea to make it a little more competitive with other people, with friends of yours. Before we go into it, the word handicap is something that I never actually understood the origin of it. The term handicapped originally comes from a game called Hand in Cap, which is a game of chance in which every person would have an equal chance of winning in each succeeding game that you played. Later is applied to horse racing. You would handicap a fast horse by hanging stones on it to slow it down. It began then in the late 19th century to be applied to people with disabilities, and it occurred as phrase handicapped in the race for life. So this is definitely a term that can be offensive, and it's a term that is still used today. So I don't think it's going away as far as this term of a handicap in a sport, and so that's why I'll be using it in this video. Although it's quite difficult to implement this, and there's a lot of variations and variety of ways we could do it. Now, I contacted my brother, who's much more into the sportsing and statistics, and to ask him his ideas with this. So I came up with some ideas, and often with sports, you'll take about 80% of the difference between, let's say, you and another team. And I'm using bowling as an example. That's something that I used to do when I was younger. And with a handicap for that, often you'll take 80% of the difference between the top game or an average of games. And that way it's 80% because it still gives those who are faster a bit of an advantage. If you did 100%, it can definitely even the playing field completely. But, you know, for those who are already fast, it's nice to have a little advantage because that's kind of what you do. So I created a spreadsheet. I've got this big spreadsheet here where there are all of the numbers from the second round of Pittsburgh Fall 2021. I'm using the second round because that was the last round I was in. I want to be part of this. And what I did was I typed in all of the times that people got for that round, and I took in their best average before that round. I made sure to use round one because there are some people who have not competed in 6 years, I believe. Let me check who that was. A cuber, William Medeiros. I probably mispronounced that. I apologize. Had not competed in 6 years, so there was a big jump there. And some people just had a big jump. One person, Braden Adams, jumped from 13-second average to 9 seconds in 1 year. Now, of course, Braden should be given a little more love for that big change and maybe not completely just take the best average. Now, because that was within the last year, that's a huge jump. And honestly, people should be watching Braden Adams to see what happens in the future. That's a great progress. But for those who haven't cubed in a long time, there can be a lot of variables with that. What would be nice to have a weekly average that everyone does so you can constantly see where people are, and then maybe take an average of the last few months. That way one really lucky average of 5 does not skew everything. There's a lot of other things we could take into effect, such as location of the competition, time of day of the competition. From maybe some cubers do really good earlier on than later, what round it is. There's a lot of things we could add into this, but with the very few number of competitions, especially in the past couple of years that people have done, it's hard to do that. And with something that's a little bit over, I think, than what we need at the moment. So in the spreadsheet, I have a few different options. We have Max Park's best average and Luke Garrett's best average. And I had Luke Garrett because he was at the competition. So first I wanted to check what would be 80% of Max's top compared to what other people's best average was. So for example, I highlighted Luke Garrett because he came in first place in round 2. 80% of the difference between Luke Garrett's best average and Max Park is 0.5 seconds, 0.552 to be exact. So we subtract that from the average he got during the round. His average during the round was 6.59, which leaves him with a 6.038 for that round. For me, my best average before was 13.15. I got a 12.93, and my handicap would be 6.964. So you subtract that, and my average for that round was 6.666. The times were the exact same. I'm keeping the highlights the same, so instead of being every other, they're just blue and white, and they're the exact same. Now, I believe it could be adjusted slightly here or there, just small amounts based on the percentage of the difference, but for this it stayed the exact same. So in round 2, Luke got first place, I took 42nd. If we use the adjusted 80% handicap, Luke is now 9th place, and I am now 26th. So definitely better with that adjustment. And then I also took 100% difference, which would in a way completely level the playing field. And for me, I ended up now in 9th place, and Luke dropped down to 24th. So the reason for that is because I had a nicer average. I actually beat my personal record. So those who beat their previous record will obviously do better. So Ethan Todd and John McNeil are both in that top 2 spots for both adjusted averages. Both Ethan Todd and John McNeil dropped 2 seconds from their previous record, and that's a huge difference between that, so that's why they are in those top 2 spots. Of course, there are some issues with this. I mean, there could literally be someone with a negative number for their average, and with that adjustment, but this is a good way of going about it. Now, so in a competition, that's probably not the best idea. It might be a fun award. Some competitions I've gone to, they've handed out fun awards. So for example, I believe I came in 3rd place for best beard at one point. I did get 1st place for best standard deviation because it was insane. I had like a 20-second and a 11-second, but if let's say you want to compete with one other person, so let's say I wanted to compete with Derpy Cuber and we both decided it was okay to compete, because you don't want to do that if it's not, people don't agree on it. However, I haven't asked Derpy Cuber if I can involve him in this video. Well, he way beat me in the second round because my average was 12.93 and his was 8.29. But with the 80% adjustment, which I think is a good number to go by, my adjustment is 6.66 seconds and Derpy Cuber's was 6.93. I think it's perfectly fine to use Max Park as the basis, and whoever might have the world record average in the future, use that. This could also just be fun to do outside of a competition. So if you're doing an online competition that's not official and you want to make it an even playing field, you can do this. What I would suggest doing though is making sure people have an average beforehand. So maybe doing 12 solves, or taking a round 1 and maybe round 2 and making that the round 3, because as you saw, some people have not competed in 6 years and do some really crazy things, or even just crazy things in 1 year. Thank you very much for watching. Leave your thoughts and questions down below. I'm not super up with statistics as far as sports betting and odds and adjustments like this. So if you think there's a better way of doing it, let me know. Of course, there's a lot of variables that we talked about that could make this more accurate, but there's a lot of different ways of doing it. So let me know what your thoughts are below. Hit like, subscribe for more content like this in the future, and as always, stop by speedcubeview.com for more news and reviews.